on the chairs there in your laps now is that Bill passed out some papers stapled together, and it is wall bracing. His is the 2009 IRC, and his is he has a book with commentary. And he gives in layman terms of, hey, this is what we were looking at. This is the interpret how it should be interpreted. To where the other book is doesn't have that commentary, doesn't give insight as to what they were looking at, what the costs were, with coming up with that. So Bill has that packet there, has that information on it, and that very last page is going to be a cheat sheet, and we'll go over that here in a little bit. It's a great cheat sheet to have. Always have it with you on the job site or whenever you're doing plans or whatever, because that's I don't know the information that's on there. It's in my mind somewhere, but there's so many options and so many ways you can do it, and based on opening heights of your windows and doors and then plate heights, and so it's best to have a cheat sheet there. So we'll go over how that cheat sheet works here in a little bit. Okay, so now we know why we need braced wall bracing, what we're trying to resist, and somewhat how to resist those. Now you know, and then we also know where braced wall lines go, offsets, angles, and everything there. So now it's putting this into a calculator and figuring out how much bracing is required. So to do that, we need to first know all the components of a braced wall. What's in a braced wall line? A braced wall line consists of braced wall panels. And you can get many different braced wall panels by code. And so that's what we'll go over now, is what are braced wall panels and where do they go? Braced wall panels, a bunch of different ones. You have intermittent methods, continuous sheath method, and then narrow alternates. We'll go over each one of those in detail. So your intermittent methods consist of these 8 here. The ones highlighted in yellow are typically the ones we see. Again, we don't see hardboard panel siding anymore. We don't see diagonal wood boards and things like that. So no sense of going into all those. We just go over the ones that we typically see nowadays. So as you can see, there are 8 different intermittent methods that the code allows you to use. Your intermittent methods will consist of all of these right here, and I think that's on that back sheet there. Maybe on the front side of that back sheet is part of that chart there, and show you some information that says about that. So lead-in bracing, LIB is lead-in bracing. It used to be that it was method 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. No one, you'd have to refer back to the code. Well, what the heck was method 3? Now they've done it to where it's just LIB, WSP. It's easier to remember what they are there. So your lead-in bracing gives you your method. Next one over gives you your description, and then it gives you your minimum length. How wide or what's the narrowest that could be to qualify as a braced wall panel. And that's the key issue there, is that to qualify as a braced wall panel, you may have 12-inch section of wall that, someone says, oh, that's not braced. Well, you may not need it to count as bracing. Not every part of the house has to be braced. You have to have certain amount of bracing on each wall line, and then the braced wall panels within that wall line have minimum widths. So that's what we're going over right now. So the lead-in bracing, you can see it's broken down into 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12-foot plate heights. 12 is the maximum you can go prescriptively. So by code, out of the code book, you can only go up to 12-foot plate heights. Anything over that has to be engineered. And so, again, except for great rooms, when you can build around those if your other wall lines are less than 12 feet tall. So you can do that. So your minimum length for lead-in bracing on an 8-foot plate height, you have to have 5 feet of sheathable or area to where you can get that lead-in bracing in. And then your effective length that means how much does it actually count for. so it counts as the length only. So if you have an 8 foot plate height, the minimum is 5 feet, and that's what you have, that's what it counts as. So, and then it has some notes on here off to the side, limited to top 2 stories and limited to low side and regions. So this gives you all the information here, but the effective length is the big one. These 2 charts here, or these 2 sections here, minimum length and effective length. We'll go over the effective length of all of these in detail when we go into the details about it. So those are the intermittent methods. Most people are using OSB and will opt to use continuous sheath as your method. But when you get to interior walls, you don't want to necessarily put OSB on your interior walls, you know, have to get wire jams and all that. So, so you can use chipboard as one of your methods. So you have some options there. So your brace wall panel, lead-in bracing, it's 1x4 lead-in bracing or approved metal straps, 45 to 60 degree angle, wall length anywhere from 5 feet to 8 feet, how wide your wall has to be, and fastened to plates and studs. And again, the effective length is the length of the wall. There's some issues with lead-in bracing, especially when you're using wood lead-in bracing, is that the notching has to be perfect, because this has to move, it looks like that may be at least a ½ inch before that would really engage. So that wall could do a lot of racking before that would actually engage to try to resist that. So there's issues with the lead-in bracing, even the metal strap type of lead-in bracing. And not only the notching, but the kerf that's in there. They cut a kerf up through there. Well, that just weakened that member that's trying to resist there. So you do have some issues there with lead-in bracing as well. So wood structural panels is your next option. Minimum of 3/8 inch plywood or OSB. And your nailing pattern is 6 inches on center at the edge, and then 12 inches in the field. So anything that's on the edge of that is every 6 inches is nail. Anything interior there in the field is 12 inches on center. And it gives you some information down here for wood structural panels. Again, this is 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12 foot plate heights here, and then your effective lengths here. Prior to, I don't know if it's 2009, I don't think 2006 had this, but I think it's new to 2009, is that you can get partial credit now. Because it used to be that, okay, 4 foot, I need 4 feet of OSB to count as a brace wall panel with no straps or hold downs or extra hardware or anything, just a certain nailing pattern. So, you know, builders got together, well, what if I don't have 4 feet? You're telling me that it's 4 feet or SOL? So they come up with partial credits. So now you can get down to, on an 8 foot plate height, 8 or 9 foot plate height, if you have 3 feet 6 inches. So if you have 42 inches of sheathed wall, yes, it counts as bracing. It doesn't count as 4 feet. That doesn't count as 42 inches. The effective length is 3 feet. You have 42 inches, it actually counts as 3 feet of space of bracing. But again, it's only on 8 and 9 foot plate heights. You can't do it on 10, 11, or 12 foot plate heights. And so you can get down to 36 inches, 3 feet on an 8 foot plate height only, and you get partial credit that counts as 27 inches. So just kind of keep in mind, you can get partial credits there. Anywhere from 4 feet to 4 feet 10 inches when you're talking about how wide it has to be compared to the plate height. Structural fiberboard, ½ inch minimum thickness, 3 inches on center edge fastening, 6 inches field fastening, and they have the same kind of requirements here for partial credits and effective lengths as well. Any of those structural fiberboards, you just would have to make sure it's structurally rated, because they do have fiberboards that aren't structurally rated and some that are. So you have to make sure it's structurally rated fiberboard. Gypboard on one face. So gypboard, you can use gypboard as your bracing. If you're doing it on one side only, and the reason one side only, some areas in Kansas, they don't finish out their garages. You know, they just do OSB and the studs showing on the inside. So if you're using chipboard as your method, a minimum of 8 feet if it's one-sided, 1/2 inch thickness, 7 inch on center, edge fastening here. So that's the one you gotta worry about here is 7 inches on center. I don't know if they're usually 12 inches or something maybe that they're going along with doing it, but you have to have it 7 inches on center there for your edge fastening. You have single-sided and double-sided. So if you're doing both faces here, you can get down as narrow as 4 feet. It's 4-foot section of OSB, but it has to be, again, done on both sides with 7 inches on center fastening. So you're double-sided, 4 feet based on plate height. So 4 feet 10 inches if it's a 12-foot tall wall. And your effective length is just the length that it is. So if you have 4 feet, it counts as 4 feet. If you have 8 feet, it counts as 8 feet. So it's just the effective length is the length. Any questions on the intermittent methods? Okay. Your braced wall panels for your continuous sheathing are requirements of 3/8 wood structural panel sheathing. You have to sheathe above and below all openings, and 6/12 nailing pattern, 6 inches in the field and 6 inches on the edge, 12 in the field. But it is, every single area has to be sheathed above and below the openings. And the reason they're different here is that's an opening, that can't count as braced wall panel. These possibly could count the full sheets. Because it has to be full height, OSB, or if it has splices there, they have requirements for splices, but it can't just be that section there counting as bracing. Your minimum length on that is where that sheet, the very back page of the ones that are stapled together is on the back side of it gives you some information as to the amount of bracing that is required next to an opening is based on the wall height and then the height of that opening. So, we'll kind of get into how that works there. I think I've got it. I don't know why it's pushed over. So in the 2009 IRC, this is how the chart looks. 2012, they actually got it to where they have all of them filled in. So your adjacent clear opening height, so anything less than 64 inches, based on an 8-foot plate height, next to a window that is less than 64 inches tall, on an 8-foot plate height, next to it you have to have 24 inches. You don't have to have 24 inches, but if you want to count it as a braced wall panel, then it has to be 24 inches. It can be 12 inches, 9 inches, whatever your plans call for, but you can't count it as a braced wall panel, and you may not need to. So it'll make more sense when we actually go back into the plan. But this is the biggest. This is one I use the most for the cheat sheet because I can't remember all these numbers here. If it's a 10-foot plate height, then 84-inch opening, I have, is it 30 inches or 27? I don't remember. So that's why I keep that one handy. It tells you how wide that panel has to be next to an opening if you want to count it as a braced wall panel. So your continuous sheathing methods are, you've got continuous sheath here. Yes, sir.
Just one thing, guys. On the continuous sheathing method, it does let you get down to that 24 inches, and you count that as 24 inches toward bracing. If you remember back those previous slides on the intermittent bracing types, 36 inches was minimum, and then you didn't get to count all that 36 inches, okay? So there's a lot of difference in bracing requirements when you're using the continuous sheathing. And because you're using continuous sheathing, the code is giving a lot of breaks on that.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good point, is that with the continuous sheath methods, like I showed, I was saying in the plans that we did, is that, yeah, you can stop it right here, this brace wall line, you can stop right here. When you put it into the calculator, you're going to put continuous sheath as your method, and it may come out that you need 5.6 feet of bracing on this wall line. But if you actually take it to where you're going in here and put chipboard as your method, you end up needing 18.6 feet of bracing on that wall
And
line.
if you get away from the continuous sheeting method, then your continuous sheeting portal frames can't be used. Okay, so there's limitations on what can and can't be done on that part of it. So there's a lot of advantages for staying with the continuous sheeting. I think it's still a pretty reasonable product right now, and I'm sure that will come into play as prices fluctuate on what type of product people want to use, but there are some advantages there. Okay.
Over
So-
96 inches, I'm sorry, over 96 inches opening, you cannot use this cheat sheet to go like to portal panel or something.
Well, because that's an 8-foot plate height.
Yeah.
So you can't be 100 inches on an 8-foot plate height. Your plate height is here, your window can't be above that. So it's just based on, yeah, so if there's nothing below here, that means you've reached the maximum height of the wall. You can't go any higher than that there, so, yeah, good question though. So go back to what you're saying there in this one here. We're picking up an inside, you say you can't count CSPF as your options here. If you had to do continuous achieve portal frame here, can you do that here?
If you're using other than the continuous sheeting method, and you need to use a portal frame, you're gonna have to do a portal frame with hold downs or something. You can't use this continuous sheeting portal frame method.
Okay. You can use CS, just the wood structural panel, but the portal frames, yours would have to be with a hold down. Okay, that makes sense.
Because the continuous sheeting method is not being used, and
Mix.
that goes with the continuous sheeting methods that you have at the bottom.
Just real quick, so if this one,
I'm-
no, that's, this one here, I use chipboard as one method.
Right.
So I've got chipboard here. Can I use CS WSP, or do I have to use just WSP? So it has to be 4 feet.
You
That would be CS WSP, okay. Just not, none of the CS portal frames. Okay. So your continuous achieve methods are all continuous achieve, no types of hold downs or anything. You've got continuous achieve method that may require some hold downs or alternate braced walls that may require some hold downs. You have special corner framing that's required. If you don't meet the special corner framing, you may have to put a hold down at the edge of your first qualifying braced wall panel, or you may not have to. So it's gonna, we'll go over into all the situations in which we just saw there. So the special corner framing in continuous sheath method only, it requires you to have special corner framing. So continuous sheath methods are the most rigid. You're having to use less bracing because you're continuously sheathing that wall. And so it's going to require less bracing, but there are requirements. And that is the special corner detail. You have to do your corners built just like this here, and it's probably in that packet. But you have to build your corners this way here, and it says minimum 24-inch wood structural panel on this wall line here, or 32 inches structural fiberboard sheathing corner return. And that's going to be the same this wall and this wall. So at a corner, you build it like this, you have to have 2 feet of bracing, or 2 feet of sheathable area there. If you don't have 2 feet of sheathable area, then you're gonna have to use a hold down device. It's gonna be an 800-pound hold down device. We'll go over here in a little bit. But, and maybe this will all make sense here. So special corner framing, 24-inch panel is on each side of the corner. So here, saying you have 24 inches and you have 24 inches here, you don't have to have any kind of hardware. You don't have to have that 800-pound hold down device. This X through here is a braced wall panel at the end of the braced wall line. The X's mean that it is a braced wall panel. So just because you have 24 inches here doesn't necessarily mean you can count it as a braced wall panel because you're continuously sheathed. So it's based on this opening right here. So if that 24 inches qualifies as a braced wall panel, say it's an 8-foot plate height here, all you needed was, and less than 64, 8-foot plate height with less than 64-inch opening here, 24 inches was required there, or the minimum that it could be. So in this case, 24 inches would count as a braced wall panel. So always keep in mind that if you want to count this as a braced wall panel, it has to fall within those guidelines on that sheet.
I got a question. If that was, so you're wanting more or less 4 foot of continuous around the outside corners, what if it was 12 inches and 3 foot?
No, it has to be 24 and 24. Yeah, because they're saying that the 24 inches is, they're working together to prevent this 24-inch piece and this 24-inch piece. What the code, what they were looking at is saying that, okay, I have 24 inches here. This wall panel here is going to try to resist any overturning, racking, or anything from here. It's going to try to serve as a hold down. Is what they were looking at there. So anything less than 12 inches or 24 inches here on one side or the other, you're going to have to put a hold down somewhere along there. We'll show you where it actually would be.
But if that was a garage door opening,
Yeah, we'll
that
show that.
requires a different assembly.
Right, yeah, exactly. Yeah, we'll show you that here in just a second. So this one here is 24-inch panel and a 24-inch panel here. Well, you only have 24 inches next to a door. Probably going to need 27 or 30 inches. So this does not qualify as a braced wall panel. Even though you have 24 inches, it does not qualify as a braced wall panel.
Once the door height is 80 inches, you need 32 inches on an 8
On
foot.
8 foot. Yes, yeah, so good. And it is only 24 inches there. So it does not have to count as a braced wall panel. You just have to have 2 feet, 24 inches there. Again, you don't have to, but if you don't, you're using extra hardware. So you have 24 inches and you have 24 inches, but you don't, but this is not a braced wall panel. So now you have to look at your first braced wall panel has to be within 12.5 feet. So this first braced wall panel here where this X is, that has to be within 12.5 feet from the corner here. So as long as it falls within 12.5 feet from that corner and it qualifies as a panel based on these 2 openings here, then you don't need any type of hold down. Does that make sense? So.
You're saying a full 4x8 sheet?
No, full height. It doesn't have to be, based on this window here, 8-foot plate height, maybe less than 64 inches, you only need 24 inches there. So it's, you always look, whenever you have an opening.
That's interior as well as on the corners.
Yeah, any, that little cheat sheet there, that's anywhere in the house. Or on your exterior walls there, interior, you're gonna continue to sheet your interior. But it's, anywhere that there is an opening, you will use that cheat sheet and see if that qualifies for her. You may not need it to qualify for a panel. You've got one here, so you may not need one for another 25 feet on center. You may not need one. You may based on how much bracing you need on that wall line, but always look at your opening compared to your plate height and see if it qualifies as a panel. You're already nailing it off at 6 and 12, so without any extra hardware, you might as well say, yeah, that's braced wall panel, that's braced wall panel, that's braced wall panel, you know, on and on. So, so if you have your corner details here, but even though this does not qualify as a braced wall panel, you're allowed to be 12.5 feet from the end of a braced, continuously sheathed. I'll go over that here in a little bit as well. There's another flyer there that within 12.5 feet from the end of a braced wall line and the continuously sheathed. You can come in 12.5 feet from each end and before your first braced wall panel starts. So this could be a garage, single car garage. You know?
12.5 from both ends, or 12.5 total?
each end. It's gonna be different for intermittent, and I'll have one for that. But when you're talking continuous sheet only, you're allowed to come in 12.5 feet from this end and 12.5 feet from this end. Now, on all the other methods, it's 12.5 feet combined. So if you were to come in 10 feet before your first brace wall lines, or brace wall panel started over here, you only have 2.5 feet to work with over here. That's on all other methods except for continuous sheet. So it really becomes a play when you're looking at, when you're combining methods in a wall line, or you're in an interior wall line where you're all intermittent. Okay, so you have your special corner framing is not present. So you have 24 inches here, but you don't here. So what it said earlier about each one of these are acting to help the other one resist any of those forces is they were saying that it's acting like a hold down, holding that one into place. Well, you don't have 24 inches here, so you don't have that 24-inch return, you lost your hold down, is what it's saying. So you have to add a hold down. That's your first qualifying brace wall panel. This one just happens to be that it's 24 inches. It does qualify because that's all you need on an 8-foot plate height based on this opening of less than 64 inches. 24 inches, so your hold down would go here. And
That's a 4,200-pound hold down, but not an 800.
no, this is gonna be your 800-pound hold down device. So that's gonna be your kind of your post-installed piece here. You don't have to go with these large ones here. These are both post-installed. This one's an HTT5, has almost 5,000 pounds of capacity. You don't need that much there. You just need a DTT2Z. Some folks are just saying, I'm using this all the time, but the cost difference between these is pretty good cost difference to that. Yes. The only problem with having to is that you may get this one out on the job site when you needed this one. This covers all of the post-install applications. So some say, I'm just thinking that I don't want any confusion out there. I don't want a red tag to have to go out and replace the whole, especially if the bolts are epoxied into the concrete already with not the right anchorage. You're going to need more anchorage, So, so anyway, they depends on you. I do see a lot of people using DTT2Zs instead of the HTTs. So you can go either way. Yes, it's going to be less for a DTT2Z. It's only 800
The
pounds.
800 pound is the minimum for that.
Yes, yeah. And I think that's actually gets over 18, maybe 1,800. So almost 2,000, I think. So you have to have your hold down device, 800-pound hold down device, at your first qualifying brace wall panel. And so this one actually qualified based on that opening blade height.
If
So-
that was over,
Yeah, so this one here is saying that you don't have your return 24 inches here, you don't have 24 inches here, or even if you did have 24 inches here, it may not be wide enough. But, so it's saying special corner frame is shot, your detail shot there because you don't have your 24 inches. So your first qualifying brace wall panel has to have the 800-pound hold down device. And again, you can't start more than 12 feet 6 inches from that end.
If they're going on the corner, what's the maximum distance from the corner for that 800 pound?
It's going to be the 12.5. Yeah, it's at your first qualifying brace wall panel. So your first qualifying brace wall panel has to be within 12.5 feet. And so you kind of look at this is that what it's saying is you have one corner fail, they're both going to fail. You need a hold down device here, and you don't have 24 inches here, so you're going to have the same problem. You're going to have a brace wall panel within 12.5 feet from the corner here for this wall line. So if your special corner framing's shot, it's just like this here, you've got to have one at your first qualifying panel here. So it's the same way on the other wall. So I've got 24 inches here, but I don't have it here, so my hold down has to be within 12.5 feet. So it's the same both ways. Just one corner fails, they both fail.
That should be at the start of this panel going this direction. And I see a lot of times, because they run electrical wires here or something, they'll move over a stud or move over two studs and put it in. Well, that's really not meeting the requirements
Right.
to keep that from tilting, okay? So you really need to try and get that in there. So that's important that these are done before your trades come in, okay? They need to be installed, and then the trades can do whatever they want to do, okay?
So what if we have over 24, let's say 24 inches brace wall line qualified to
Right here?
count as a yes?
So
brace
you
wall
can have
line.
24 inches
Then
there?
then you need another hold down there also?
No, if, that would go back to this one here, same thing, you just put it here, you don't have to put it on this one. So this one here, if this was if this was 24 inches and actually qualified, it probably wouldn't qualify based on the height of it, you'd probably need 32 inches like we talked about. So if it qualifies as a brace wall panel, based on that opening and the plate height, then your hold down goes here. It doesn't go, you won't need one over here. That's at your first qualifying brace wall panel. You don't have to do 1, 2, or 3, or 4 of them, you just, or 2, 3, or 4, you just do the one. First qualifying brace wall panel has to have that 800-pound hold down. So,
I really don't understand, I'm just asking what the code, what the IRC code saying this? Because you
because-
can have it two different directions, you can have a lateral force. And hold down, holding the panels down to the foundations. So it comes this way, that one works properly, comes the other way, the other one works properly.
yeah.
So it makes sense, it doesn't make sense to me, it makes sense to have it on
Makes
both
sense to me.
sides.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes sense to me. I see it all the time in Oklahoma City, but it's one that's, I see guys all the time putting, they don't need them, but they're going ahead and putting them in, and they're putting one on one side of the garage, one on the other side of the garage. Well, this is a panel here. If you're holding down here, wind's blowing this way, you're holding that down,
It's going to get
you got
better.
your hold down here, it's not gonna go anywhere when you're pushing this way. But when you're pushing this way, that's staying right there, everything else is coming up.
Yes.
So, yes, they should work in pairs, but that's again, a give and take of the code, and kind of what the code is now saying, with the special corner framing, they're saying that, now, I guess the special corner framing isn't into play there, so. Now, I see where you're coming from, it makes sense, that's what we believe is, it's portal frame, both sides should be held.
That's one of those things, the builders come back and said, hey, I gotta be able to put a window on this corner. My client wants a window here, my client wants a door. So they
Right.
compromise and they say, okay, we'll let you move this thing 12.5 feet off the corner.
Right.
That's where all that comes from.
But it still should be that even if, yes, if you're coming over and saying this is my first brace wall panel, to me, you need a hold down there too, because it's a portal frame. Or, it's a brace wall panel, it's a portal, type thing, but they're not considering it a portal. They're just considering it, a brace wall panel, not any type of portal with hold downs, it's just a panel.
This is also a panel on this end of the wall. There should be a panel down at the other end of the wall, keeping it from going the other direction.
Right, yeah, because you'll have one down on this end down here, a panel of some sort, may not have to have hold downs or anything, but, no, from engineering standpoint, I agree. But it's just, that's why they have residential code and then engineered, prescriptive design and engineered design, they don't meet, and, as long as prescriptive covers a good majority of homes and situations in homes, they're fine. They can't just say that, okay, this IRC book is now an engineering design guide, so.
Why are we having to put 4,200-pound hold downs on two on each side of the two-car garage?
We'll go with that. They
So we only
make
need
sense.
one on the outside corner on each side?
No, because this
Because
is,
of the span?
we'll go with that. So you just keep in mind that if you don't have 24 inches on both corners, you need a hold down, an 800-pound hold down device on both walls. Depends on if it's gonna be right at the corner or within 12.5 feet from each end. But you're gonna need, if one corner fails, one wall fails, you need 2 hold down devices, one for each wall.
Okay,
So,
gotcha.
with some exceptions when you're already using these 4 frames we'll go over, and it'll be on the plans. So your 800-pound hold down device, if you're doing flooring, you know, it could be a strap there, or DTT 2Gs when you're going to the foundation. Okay, so that was your continuous sheath methods. Really, for the most part, no hold downs required, except for when you don't have that 24, that special corner detail. Just 6 inch on the edge nailing and 12 inches in the field nailing. No straps, no, just standard construction there. So now it's, okay, what if I don't have the minimum 24 inches or whatever is required by that cheat sheet there? What if I don't have that much wall space? How narrow can I get? So now we're going to talk about some alternate narrow methods. First one is the ABW alternate braced wall, and then portal frame with hold downs and portal frame at garage. You've got a sheet in here that is this one here, our literature, Simpson's literature, this one here. And when I'm doing a class like this, I try not to wear a Simpson hat, you know, preaching for our products or anything. This one here it's really straight out of the code, except for we've just added where it says 800-pound hold down device. We tell you what the product is, because guys out in the field, the lumber, you know, you guys may not know out in the field, oh, damn, I need a hold down device, 4,200 pounds. I don't know what that is, you know, so we've got it in here of what the product actually is. Other than that, if you look on page 4, you're going to 4 and 5, you're going to see the details that we're going to go over. And again, these are straight out of the code book, except for when it does say minimum 4,200 pound embedded type hold down. We put our...
And those printouts that I gave you, all those pages stapled together are out of the code book. You'll find this same diagram in there. But they're just not very plain, they're not very detailed. So I hand these Simpson ones out a lot because they're the best picture that I can give you. And it's the easiest to try and understand what nailings go where and things.
I would also circle on this here. We'll go over some things you can write on here as a good cheat sheet. But this portal frame garage detail here, where it just ends at a post, so you only needed one portal frame on that side, you can end it at a post. But what's missing in the code book is the wording in there says that you need, if you're ending it here, you got a 1,000-pound strap up here at the top, you need a 1,000-pound hold down device here at the bottom. So it doesn't show that here, but it says it in the wording, so it's just, so I circle down here and put 1,000-pound hold down. Because if you're resisting 1,000 pounds up at your header, and your header's tied to your top wall, your rackers, that's all tied up, that's lifting up, nothing holding down here to the seal plate besides some nails that are maybe toenail or ingrain nailed. So you have to have a 1,000-pound device there as well. So our next print of this, hopefully we'll get that in there, and I don't know if they changed, if they actually showed it in 2012 or not. So that's one, just some information on that piece of literature there. We'll go into these methods, the narrower methods, in detail now. Other methods that you have, they're not, well, one of them is, no, both of these are, the continuous sheath, portal frame, and then the continuous sheath garage opening. So anytime you see one with a G on it, CSG here, PFG is garage, and it can only be used at the garage, nowhere else than the rest of the house. But all these others could be used at the garage or anywhere else, so just keep that in mind there. Okay, so we'll start off in that literature that, with our literature has on page 3, it shows the details of this, as well as in Bill's literature that he handed out. So it's going to show you your alternate braced wall panel here. So your alternate braced wall replaces 4 feet of braced wall panel. Your minimum width is 28 inches up to 42 inches. It requires 3/8 wood structural panel, 6-inch on center edge nailing, 12-inch on center field nailing, two hold downs, and 2 anchor bolts. The anchor bolts aren't shown, but you have to have anchor bolts in here and as well as your hold down. You can use it for the first of 1 story or the first of 2 stories. If it's first of 2 story, everything's the same except for you go from 6-inch on center edge to 4-inch on center edge nailing. Everything else would remain the same there. Now look into that sheet and it tells you your hold down devices that are needed. What capacity do you need that hold down device to be? So you look at the chart here, you've got 1 story, first of 2 story, based on your plate height, you 8 to 12 feet. So your minimum length required, minimum width of that panel is based on 1 story. If you're an 8-foot plate height, you need 2 feet, 4 inches of wall space to qualify. I see so many times that they're just putting 2 HGT5s there and they've only got 12 inches, you know. They're not doing anything else that doesn't, it's not a braced wall or an alternate braced wall. So you have to have at least 2 feet, 4 inches of bracing, or of width on 8-foot plate height. And it goes up from there, all the way up to 3 feet, 6 inches, no matter if it's first of 1 story or first of 2 story. Now where the differences are in is the capacity of that hold down device. It goes anywhere from 1,800 pounds all the way up to 3,600 pounds. So with those, in the picture there, we show 2 different types. An embedded type of hold down like the STHD 14s that you could use on garage returns for the portal frame hold down method, or the post install methods, or hold downs. So you can use either one. You don't have to use one of those. Like the picture shows here, it's just we're showing that you can have 2 different types there. That's why with that method's hardly used. I don't ever suggest that method because if you've got 3 feet, 6 inches of spacing, you're probably gonna qualify as, in contingency sheet, and they go, no, you're probably gonna already qualify. So that's rarely used. We won't need to get into that any more than that, I don't think. I guess, except for saying that you don't have your 2 feet, or your 2 anchor bolts in there, because they're not gonna know when they're putting their anchor bolts in. You won't have those, so you have to post install those. Again, I would stay away from the wedge anchors because they're not approved. Any manufacturer, wedge anchors aren't approved for that close to the edge. So if you're torquing down, you have a high likelihood of blowing out that concrete. Or if it's not blowing out, you may not have the right amount of torque on there. So stay away from wedge anchors for sill plate applications because they're not code approved for that application. They're great, they're good for interior applications when you have enough concrete around. So just kind of keep that in mind. And again, it would be more along the lines of post installed, whether it's ours, anybody else's out there. It's like this, it's going to cut into the concrete and not have to worry about this plate washer right now. If you're using an anchor like this for sill plate applications, you don't need an extra washer. It's got an integrated washer on the head there. So for just sill plate anchorage, it's just the bolt. You don't need anything else. Now, when you get to talking about portal frames and things like that, you're going to need plate washers, more bearing area there. So, so just keep that in mind that these won't be in the concrete because they won't know where they are supposed to be if you use this detail. So you're going to have to do a post install after. You can use all thread and epoxy as well with nut and washer, but these are actually less expensive than all thread and epoxy and nut and washer and all that. So. So we'll get on to the other methods since they're not, that one's not as common. So now we can go alternate braced wall. I just went over that in the sheet that I showed you. So now we get to the PFH method. Portal frame and hold down method is it's the method that's gonna be used, mostly at garages. And you can go through your plans and look, determine your brace ball lines and how much bracing you're gonna need. And you may find that you don't need to do PFH method. You may not need to use hold downs. Most builders seem to be going ahead and doing that because they have plans. Some require the PFH method, some don't. They don't want there to be any confusion during the pour or anything else to where they're just doing PFH method. Product-wise, you're looking at less than $100 or around $100 for the straps for the top and the bottom, so it's not real expensive and saves them from having a red tag, because more times than not, you're gonna have more than enough bracing on that wall to qualify. So it just, most of them are doing that, and it saves them the time of actually going through, how much do I need, and what method am I gonna use? So, but that being said, this is the most popular one. There are others, but for simplicity, most people are just doing this on all their homes. So requirements of coral frame with hold down are that your minimum width. That one's written on here. It's on page 4 of this sheet, this flyer here. So on page 4 off to the left-hand side there, it has minimum width of 16 inches for a single story and then 24 for 2-story. So that's the minimum that wall spacing can be there, wall space. 3/8 wood structural panel fastened to the sheathing with 8D common, 3-inch grid pattern everywhere. That's 3 inches all the way around, all up in there, and all the way down. Yeah, 3-inch nail pattern.
Right there. This is probably one of my bigger red tags right here, nailing patterns, 3-inch centers, nailing across the header, okay? And the reason for that is if you don't have that nailing pattern, this is for a brace panel, okay? That's gotta happen. So the nailing needs to go on the 3 bottom plates also, okay? That's 3-inch centers across all 3 of those.
Do staples work as well?
Staples do not work. Needs to be nailed.
What about on the rest of the continuous sheeting? You can't use staples? I thought staples were.
I've been allowing them on the rest of them.
Yeah.
This poor frame, yeah.
Because this is one that the APA came up with, American Plywood Association. They came up with this detail, and that's the only way you can do it. If it's not built to this, it's gone. It does not work. So that's a detail that they came up with. It's in the code. Everything has to be built just like that. Most of the times I see it, yeah, hey, it looks great. 3-inch grid pattern and all that. Oh, they've only got a single sill plate. It does not. They have 3 sill plates here. This one, bottom one, obviously goes out to out underneath the studs. The other 2 are in between, in the cavity there, and held down with just your nut and washer there. But the reason they have this here is for more nailing surface there, and that's why they have that.
Go down to the top.
Yes, I think we actually do that. But yeah, you're gonna have nails into the top as well, and let's see if I get to your minimum 4,200 pound embedded strap type hold down. No, I was seeing, yeah, in our flyer, I don't know if this is gonna show up, but in our flyer here, it's gonna show that you're fastening top plate to header with 2 rows of 16D sinker nails at 3 inches on center. So there's a 3-inch grid pattern in here, going through your plate into your header there.
And that top plate's there and it's nailed to that header, and then your outside trimmer is face nailed to that. That's part of that, so you're not toenailing that. Now, if you've got an extra trimmer inside or 3 trimmers inside, trying to get enough surface place for your 4,200 pound hold downs, that's fine. But that really should be right underneath the header, and that first inside trimmer should face nail right to that. Okay?
Yeah, and you can see on, there's just not enough room to put every single thing on here. PFG method here, you'll see that fasten header Keen stud with 6 16D sinker nails. So, so that's gonna be going into your header there. Your Keen stud's going into
So
your
the
header.
king stud needs to have the same 3-inch grid pattern.
It just says, with 6 16D sinker nails.
16s.
Yeah.
Okay, just 6.
Yeah, so, I mean,
We're talking about the end of the wall, what he's
Yeah.
talking about there on the
Yeah.
king stud, going into the header.
To the GLB.
yeah. And just to, again, for simplicity, you can just say 3-inch grid pattern, you know,
And that's what your framers need to be doing. I can't see that, and I'm sure not gonna have you tear the sheeting off to do that, but
and I'm sure that's one that no one does it, even if you tell them they may not, you know, it's just, but
We
it's.
spray paint, I
it's-
spray it on there. 3-inch grid pattern.
Yeah, so just make sure that they're doing their King studs into their header too.
What
I
we
had noticed
actually,
that the staples was an issue.
we actually have a 11 by 17 sheet that just has the grid pattern on it. So the framer can tack it up there and just nail right through the dots and then
Yeah.
rip the piece of paper off and then
Oh, really?
there's no guesses. Yeah.
That's good.
We started doing that at the beginning of last year,
Very good.
so,
Yeah, you'd think that APA, that's their detail.
yeah.
You think that they would have 3 inches everywhere, this is their detail, you'd think that they would have that to where they'd be able to get those in there, but, so anyway, it has to be built exactly as shown. And how you read this here is that you may not, it may be at a garage, maybe at a single car garage to where you need to do this, but you don't need both panels, you don't need this panel and that panel. So you only need one panel. You don't need this one here, so you can disregard that. Your header stops right here and stops at a post. Same thing, you're gonna need let's see, a minimum 1,000-pound embedded hold down. Again, it has to be embedded. These here, you cannot post install these for this detail here. So, if you come up with, you've already poured, you got a red tag, and you don't meet any of the other requirements here, it's gonna be a manufactured wall or an engineered solution.
So is that a 2-car with a 3rd-car garage attachment? You can go with a 1,000-pound hold down instead of 2 42-pound?
No. This is just if,
Single car.
say the wall ends right here, completely ends right here. Or, you know, or it continues, but you have all kinds of sheathing over here, no other opening or anything. You still have to end this, you're ending this right here instead of you could just as easily take this out another 16 inches, put another embedded hold down and have your 4 walls. But if you only needed one and you didn't want to spend the money on an extra 16 inches of header and another hold down here, yes, you can end it at a stud or at a post. So 2 2-bys here, embed that into the concrete, and again, this has nothing to do with anything else over here. This has to be here. If you're ending it here, this has to be here, even if the rest of this is continuously sheathed. Because you're building it just like this. You're doing a coral frame method with hold downs. So you have to have it. You can't just do it right here and say, okay, well, I've got 10 feet of sheathing over here. I'm just not gonna put this hold down right here. I'm gonna just frame this off like normal. If you're ending it only using one, which I never see, I'm just letting you know that if you do that, you have to end it there with a,
Do you
with a
know
hold down.
the minimum requirement for a 2-car garage opening? With the,
It's typically, the amount of bracing that's needed that I've seen on most plans, 4.56 to less than 6 feet of bracing required for the wall line. It's gonna vary, but, you know, it seems like 4.57, you know, somewhere around there, 4.87 and 5, you know, so it's usually less than 6 feet. So this counts as 4 feet, that counts as nothing there. So you've got 4 feet there, but you're typically gonna need more than that. So, 2-car garage, if it's a garage, you're gonna do both of them. But if
right,
it's
so
a
they
back
typically bump out.
We'll go over the plans here as soon as we hopefully we can get there. Again, may replace 4 feet of required brace wall panel. Okay, so your next one, and that's what I write on, I go ahead and write that on here somewhere, is that this counts as 4 feet of bracing. And it's on some of your other cheat sheets there, but I have that handy there, that, yeah, it's 16 inches at minimum for a single car, or a single story, but that 16 inches actually replaces 4 feet of bracing, because of the way it's built, with the straps up top, the header going out, the nail pattern, three sill plates, and the embedded hold downs. That all works together to replace 4 feet of sheathing. So your next one is PFG. PFG, again, is garage only. So at your garage, your minimum lengths on those are going to be, off to the left here, it's a 4-to-1 aspect ratio. So for an 8-foot plate height, you're gonna need 24 inches. And again, this is at a garage only. No one has 24 inches at the garage, you know. But if you had 24 inches for an 8-foot plate height, and again, I write that on here, 24 inches for 8 foot, 27 inches for a 9-foot, and then 30 inches for a 10-foot. That's, I put those on here.
That's on 8-foot plate height too, guys. So if you got a 16-foot door, you got actually 16.4 with your trimmers, and then 24 inches, so you're gonna need 20-foot 4 inches to make that work on an 8-foot plate, okay? That make sense?
Yeah, when you're talking about plate heights here, you go back to the PFH method. The code shows, the detail shows 10-foot maximum height to the top of the header. So that's as high as you can go to the header. You can pony wall up above it and get up to 12-foot plate height. But your header has to be at the 10-foot plate, or header height has to be 10 feet or less. And it's kind of an assumption that you can go to 12 feet, because it does not say that you can't. 2012, I believe, actually comes out and said, and their detail actually shows a pony wall above it. They show a pony wall above CSPF method, and so it's kind of, in 2012, they actually showed the detail of that. So, are you?
It's in there, it says 12 feet.
Okay, I was thinking that in 2009, it just said 10 foot, it doesn't say anything about a 12-foot wall, but Bill can look at that there, so Bill is fine with that, that's what he's looking up, and he's fine with being 12-foot plate height, but your header can only be 10-foot maximum height. So for front garage, your widths for 8, 9, and 10-foot header height is 24, 27, and 30 inches. A lot of the same requirements as in your nailing pattern, nails in here, nails into your king stud, and minimum 2x4 sheathing nail to all studs, a 3-inch grid pattern here. Difference is no hold downs are required. You have to have 2 anchor bolts there. Again, 10-foot maximum height there, 1,000-pound strap. 1,000-pound strap is opposite the sheathing. Can't put it on the outside, it's opposite the sheathing, so sheathing's on the outside, straps are on the inside for your headers. Now, the ones that are PFH method are ones that go into the ones that go into the concrete are gonna be on the outside. This is a sample of the 4,200-pound PFH method, the 4,200-pound embedded type hold down is, I've got a strap mate on here. A strap mate is going to hold this into place. If you just see these triangle holes, if they're just gonna kind of nail those into the form board, that thing's just gonna flop around while they're pouring concrete and they end up like this. If your form board's here, you have, and it ends up flopping, you know, you don't have you don't have enough space, the concrete back behind there. We actually do have a new model that actually has a lip. Instead of this coming in, there's a lip that's that steel that's going there is actually just pushed out. So it kind of comes to where hopefully it's gonna hit that, form board right. But I suggest strap mates, keeps them in place, they're reusable, very inexpensive, you know, the strap mate to the form board. And again, not only that, it keeps it square, because a lot of times they're like this, you know, you got some nails sticking out into the air.
And a lot of that can come with a strap or that a separate order.
Yeah, it's,
You can use it more than once.
yeah, reusable, it's an SM1 strap, SM1 strap mate one. Those are the ones I would recommend. Maybe the concrete guy doesn't have much issues with them, especially with the newer ones that have that tab sticking out. That's gonna kind of keep that, hopefully, to where that kind of stays up straight. But it keeps them from going this way too.
Yeah, we have one that pushes out, it's not embedded, it comes out, we can see it outside now.
No solution. And we cut the top off, and you can maybe engineer or manufacture walls to where you're gonna drill down into the concrete and epoxy some all threads with epoxy and have a wall there. But you do have some spalling issues, and we address spalling in the catalog, that you can have up to a 4-inch spall and get like 90% capacity of the whole town. So, so anyway, you just try to eliminate that spall as much as possible.
Real quick, if you're splicing your sheeting on that, when we're talking about that sheeting, we're wanting from bottom plate all the way to the top, okay? If you use a splice, you have to block it, you have to put construction blocking behind it, and it needs to be nailed, the sheeting needs to be nailed from the outside. Okay, that's another big rejection point. And that goes on all your brush wall panels around the house. If you're using 9-foot plates and you're using 8-foot sheeting and you're putting splicing in, that needs construction backing, and it needs to be nailed from the outside through the sheeting into that construction backing. Okay?
And with this, I don't know about just regular continuous sheet method where they're not doing a portal frame. The splice doesn't have restrictions on, like this is 24 inches of lip wall. If you're a 10-foot plate height and you have 8-foot sections of OSB, it could be 2 feet from the top. You can splice it anywhere when it's just continuous sheath, but when it's the portal frame is where you have restrictions of where that splice can be. Is that correct? Yeah. Okay,